Hi, we're here at Flame Conference Day 1 and I'm joined by Stuart Broadley from the EIC. Stuart, what did the EIC do?
Well, thank you firstly for having me along as a moderator at Flame Conference. I've really enjoyed it. Excellent event. EIC is the UK's largest energy trade association. We have about 800 members, mainly supply chain companies, and our job is to help companies to grow around the world, and we do that through insights, data about all the main energy projects, and also we sort of jolly them along, encourage companies to grow faster.
And you've just finished a presentation entitled Reality Check. What were the discussions in that about?
Yeah, so we had an excellent panel, and we're of course at an important time for the energy industry, in fact for the world right now, with into month 3 of the Russian invasion into Ukraine, very sadly. What it's meant though for the energy industry, of course, is that we are now in a shift of the energy trilemma. If the energy trilemma can be defined as the balance between energy transition, energy security and energy affordability, then we've sort of seen a complete change in priorities over the last few months. Of course, with COP26, we were focused, rightly so, on energy transition and all things associated with achieving net zero by 2050. Now, of course, we've come out of COVID, thankfully, and we're seeing a huge growth, spikes in demand around the world as all the recoveries happen. And then suddenly, with the Ukraine invasion happening, all priorities are changing. With the recovery from COVID, it felt like industry was booming around the world with an alignment around energy transition. Now, suddenly it's about energy security. So that was kind of the key outcome of the reality check, which is, okay, now we move to energy security, but what about the third aspect of the trilemma, energy affordability? And I think the conclusion of our discussion was, we actually can't afford to do all of energy security and energy transition, but we can't afford not to do it.
And you say we can't afford not to do it. Well, we can't afford to do it, but we can't afford not to do it. How do we square that, and what does it mean for investors?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the key question, isn't it? So how do we plan our businesses as business leaders and investors in a situation where we're just waiting for the next shock, or we're waiting for the next shift in the trilemma? Will energy affordability now suddenly take over, probably in the form of a recession, and then mean that just consumers can't afford the costs of energy? So it is a challenge, and I think our advice is for investors and business leaders, diversify as much as you can. Now is not the time to put all of your bets in one area, but instead to be involved in as many of the energy sectors as you can, and in fact also to be involved in wider industry segments. So it's good to be focused on renewables because you believe in the transition, but it's also important to be involved in hydrocarbons because we need hydrocarbons for security reasons for the foreseeable future. There's different ways of thinking about renewables, and that now includes nuclear as well. So really the answer is, and this is kind of one of the key findings of the conference today, and it would have been very different a year ago, is the key strategy is be involved in as many sectors as you can, spread your bets, spread your risks. Actually, it's the right thing to get the outcome we want, which is transition and security happening at the same time.
And what do you think the role is for policymakers, and do we have a common roadmap for different countries?
Yeah, so policymakers still have a critical role, although of course one of the key roles of COP26 was for policymakers around the world to come together and to set targets to achieve net zero by 2050, for some countries by 2060, by 2070, but it's to kind of agree on that end game. And by the way, kind of what is energy transition? And perhaps that's one of the ways to think about this. You know, that many countries have a different view on how they're going to start, but we all are trying to get to an end game which is the same, which is to achieve net zero. So policymakers still have to make sure that some of the technologies that are not yet proven or economical, but are needed to achieve the full range of net zero, come to the fore in time, so at pace and at scale. That's the first thing. So using methods of stimulating demand and regulating a new market so that it happens. The second thing they have to do, though, is to then make sure the supply chain can fully participate in those markets.
in your role as co-chair of UKEST, what did the discussions of today mean for the supply chain?
Yeah, thank you. So UKEST, which stands for the UK Energy Supply Chain Ministerial Task Force, is a relatively new body that we've set up in the UK that brings together all of the heads of the main energy trade associations covering all different energy sectors: oil and gas, renewable and nuclear, hydrogen, carbon capture, and also all of the countries of the UK: Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland and England, of course. So all the governments, to then work on one key target, making sure that UK's energy supply chain fully participates in the transition. That's goal one. And two, that then we seed and route capability for current and future energy needs in the UK, so then be able to export that capability around the world. So it's about participation and then it's about growth. And so what have we learned today? We've learned today that there's an absolute need to prioritise energy security, but to also ensure transition happens. That means we've got to make sure through UKEST now that we think about how the supply chain will still participate in the transition, we still seed and route capability, and we still make that competitive so that it's exportable around the world. But with this kind of more urgent need now to think about actually a real urgent requirement for oil and gas to be back on the table. And that's very interesting. If you go back just a few months ago, of course, in the UK, oil and gas was not so much supported by government, but there has, of course, been a recent change of direction, recognising, rightly so, that although oil and gas has an important part to play in the decarbonisation journey, they also have an even more important part to play in the short to medium term, in powering the economy and the energy sector, ensuring that we have security of supply, and of course ensuring that the great skills that we have and the great supply chain we have in oil and gas can then transition in a sort of roadmap, in a structured way. Those skills are transitioned, trained across in a positive way as well, so that the perception of the industry in all energy areas is a managed process. And that's kind of what we're hoping to achieve as UKEST, is to make sure that over this next few years, months and years, that we make sure the supply chain understands these complexities of the balance between the three aspects of the energy trilemma: security, transition and affordability, and fully participates. And the kind of final thing I want to say is that the UK has world-renowned energy supply chain capability. So we've got to make sure that we protect that and invest in that capability, because the rest of the world now is waking up to this urgent need to decarbonise, and the UK and some other countries in Europe have been at the forefront of moving towards net zero in the last few years. So we have great capability. Now we've got to make sure we promote that and export it successfully around the world.